I'm so excited to be here. This is so fun. I'm from Philly, and I'm just really excited to get to talk to you a little bit. So the session is called Play Skillfully and Why It Matters. I'll tell you a little bit more about what we're going to be talking about in a minute. But first, I would just love to kind of get to know who's in the room. I'm sure that, we all come from many different experiences in different areas. So I would love to just ask you a few questions, if you don't mind raising your hand. Raise your hand if you are a worship leader. Awesome. How about if you lead your team? Cool. Instrumentalist? Great. Vocalist? What up, my people? Well, you're both my people. So I'm a piano player and a singer, a worship leader, a team leader. I oversee the worship and production at my church, which is City Life in Philly. And now I have a couple more questions for you. Raise your hand if you've had any type of formal training in music, like reading sheet music and stuff like that. Cool, okay. And then if you've ever had like a theory class or a theory lesson. Okay, great. Well, this is gonna be fun. We have a good mix in here. So I'm going to start with the scripture verse that I'm sure you know, that you're very familiar with. It's kind of our justification as worship leaders for why we play music, why we use instruments, why we sing, why we write songs. It's Psalm 33, verses 1 through 3. Sing joyfully to the Lord, you righteous. It is fitting for the upright to praise him. Praise the Lord with the harp. Make music to him on the 10-string lyre. Sing to him a new song. And here's the key for today. Play skillfully and shout for joy. So I'm sure you're familiar with this verse, right? But let's think about this together. Why do you think it says play skillfully? Please feel free to answer. I like interaction, so. It's for the Lord, right? And what about the fact that it's for the Lord makes it a thing to want to do it skillfully? Do everything in our best, offer our best. Is that who said that? Yeah, absolutely. Do our best, right? What do you think is the connection between playing skillfully and shouting for joy? What does that look like for you? There's no one right answer to any of this. It's just, what do you think? Connection between playing skillfully and shouting for joy. Yes. Come on. And it feels good, right? When it all comes together and you did your homework and you're ready to go and then you're in the moment and you just get to shout for joy, that's such a beautiful thing. And really I think the biggest part of that is that when you do the work ahead of time, you don't have to think about it when you're worshiping. And I'm going to say worship leader a lot, and I just want to clarify that when I say worship leader, I mean everyone here, okay? So if you're singing harmonies, if you're leading a song, if you're playing drums, whatever you're doing, you're a worship leader, because if you're on stage and people are watching you, as an example of what are we supposed to do in this moment, right? So as worship leaders, when we do all the work ahead of time and then we just get there, we don't have to think and we can just flow. Isn't that what we all want? That's what we're all going for, right? So skill matters because it removes distractions. So you don't want to be on stage thinking about shoot, is that a G chord or a C chord, right? What was my harmony again? You don't want to be thinking like that because that's a distraction from your experience with the Lord in the moment. And then there are things that are distractions from the people in the room who we're leading, from their experience with the Lord. If we're doing things that obviously sound wrong, right? Everyone knows, if you've ever been in that situation, that there can be something that could just take you right out of the moment. And of course, mistakes happen to everyone, right? And there's tons of unending grace for that, right? But we want to minimize those distractions as much as possible, right? So, have you ever tried to play or sing something that you heard and you were maybe it was just kind of bursting and you wanted to express that, but you tried to play it or sing it and it just wouldn't come out? So that's a barrier in our technique when that happens. And now here's another question. Have you ever heard something that you loved, maybe on a worship album, and you thought man, I would just love to figure out what they're doing because I want to do that, but you just didn't know how to figure it out? Well, that's a barrier of theory and ear training. So these are things that if anyone went to school for music in this room, you probably had a whole, semester or more dedicated to each of those things. I want to focus on the theory piece of that today. And theory is the kind of the intellectual side of music. And it may be a little scary. I know I meet a lot of people who, maybe studied this as a kid and it terrified them. And I just want you to know this is a tool, okay? So this is not something that you have to do in order to be a good musician or in order to be skillful, but this is just a tool that's at our disposal, and if it's given to us, why not steward it and use it to make us better, right? So with all of this, excellence comes up a lot. So playing skillfully means playing with excellence, but what does excellence mean? I think a lot of times we think excellence means perfection. And that's just not true, because are we ever going to be perfect? No, we're not going to be perfect spiritually, and we're not going to be perfect musically either. So let's define excellence this way together. Excellence is doing the best you can with what you have. Doing the best you can with what you have. And we all have something different, right? We all have different tones in our voices. We all have different budgets for buying gear for our instruments, right? We all play different instruments. We all have different levels of knowledge. So the first thing is, whatever you have, you want to do the very best you can with it. And then the second thing is, you have an opportunity to actually grow to beyond what you have, right? The more you learn, the more you study, the more you're open to whatever it is that God would bring into your life, again, for you to steward, He's going to grow your capacity. So music theory is one of those things that can really grow your capacity. So I'm doing the best I can with what I have today, and that honors God. But if tomorrow I have a little bit more, then I'm going to be faithful with that too. Are you with me? Awesome. So I am a music theory teacher at the University of the Arts in Philly, so I'm a total theory nerd, okay? So if you're a theory nerd too, I got you, right? I feel that energy over here. I love that. And I want to lay out exactly what theory is. It's not the music itself, because anyone can interact with music, appreciate it, play it, listen to it, be moved by it without knowing anything about why it is the way it is. So it's not the music itself, but it's a system, and specifically the system that we use in Western music. That's only one of the many systems that exist. But this system of music theory is the language that enables us to walk into a room of musicians we've never met before and do something amazing together and play a set together, even though we don't really know each other, because we have this common language, right? So because theory is not the music itself, it can be a little bit confusing sometimes when we have different names for different things in different contexts. So don't worry too much about these details right now. We'll talk about it in a little bit. But for instance, if I'm in the key of A and I say I'm playing a D flat, that would be incorrect in that context, even though a D flat is the same note as a C sharp, and it looks the same and it sounds the same. It's just in a different context. And if we're going to use the system, we might as well use it right. So theory is the way that we get to communicate with other musicians. It's the way that we write music down. It's the way that we read music, even if it's a chord chart. I'm not even talking about reading sheet music today. That's a whole other thing, which honestly is probably not super relevant in most of our church contexts. But even just reading a chord chart, it's the way that we learn how to interact with that. And the more you know about it, the more you can interact on just a deeper level. All good so far? Okay. So I want to ask you some more questions now, okay? Because I have kind of two ways this can go, depending on how you guys are feeling today. So could you raise your hand, please, if you would say you know what key signatures are, and if I were like, hey, how many flats are in D flat, you would know? Raise your hand if you're in that place today. All right. Okay, so for you guys, this will be a little bit of review for you first, okay? But we're going to go through this together. The ultimate thing that I want to get to today, if we have time, and if we don't, it's okay, and you can reach out to me anytime, and I'd love to hang with you and geek out with you about theory. I'll give you my email at the end. But I want to teach you the number system. also known as Roman numerals or the Nashville number system, but it's just a really easy way to communicate with other musicians, especially like on the spot, even in a spontaneous worship context or something like that. But before we do that, let's do some basic theory stuff. So I said the word key signatures, okay? So a key signature is a combination of notes of the musical alphabet. So what is the musical alphabet? Just shout out some note names for me. C, good, what else? A, G, F, D, E, B. I think we got all of them. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G. There's no H, there's no I. We stop at G, and then it starts over at A. All right, so say this with me. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Again, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You know that. That's the alphabet. Okay, so it's 7 note names. Those are at our disposal at any time. And you probably know a little bit, even if you haven't dug into key signatures yet, we have, like I mentioned, things like C sharp, and sometimes it's F sharp, and sometimes it's G flat. So there's a system for why all of this is the way it is. And this all goes to half steps and whole steps. So a half step, now first actually, raise your hand again if you can visualize a piano in your head. Piano keys, great. Or if you play guitar, that works too, awesome. So a half step is going from one note on the piano or the guitar to the very next note. So sometimes that's from a white key to a black key. Sometimes it's from a white key to a white key. It could be either. On the guitar, it would be going up 1 fret. Okay, so that's a half step. It means that in our system, again, our system of Western music, it's not the only system that exists, but this is like the smallest increment of a transition from one note to the next that we have. Okay, so an example of that would be if you can visualize that piano and you see C, okay, the note C, and you go to the right of C, there's a black key there, and that's called C sharp. Okay. So from C to C sharp, that's in between C and D. So when we put that sharp there, that's modifying the note name, making it a little bit more specific, okay? So from C to C sharp, that's a half step. Would you repeat that to me? From C to C sharp, that's a half step. Very good. And does anybody know what a sharp means? Like if I say C sharp, what am I doing to the C? Going up, exactly. And what if I said C flat? Going down, very good. If you go down from C, again, if you can picture that piano in your head, if you go down from C, you get a C flat, but that note is also called B, okay? So let's practice going up the alphabet, starting on C. So C, and then the next is D, and in between we have C sharp, right? And then the next note name after D is E, and what would be between D and E? D sharp, very good. And then after E, what's our next note name? F. Great. Now, in between E and F, I'm not going to tell you why now because it's a very long, complicated answer. In between E and F, there's no other note, okay? You can still say E sharp, but E sharp will also be F. And if that totally confuses you, don't worry, that's not super important right now. Okay, so how about from F to the next note name, what's that? G. And what's in between those two? F sharp. From G to A, and what's in between there? G sharp. From A to B, and what's in between? A sharp. And then just like from E to F, from B to C, we don't have anything in between. So again, you can say B sharp, but that's going to sound the same and look the same as C. Are you guys with me so far? Okay, now we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to come down. So now we get to test how well we can say the alphabet backwards, which is a little tricky. So let's start at C, okay? C, and then we're going to come down to B, right? And then it really doesn't matter if you call it a sharp or a flat, but sometimes it's just a little easier to think of flats if you're going down and sharps if you're going up. So from B down to A would be the next note name jump, but in between B and A, we can say that note is B flat, and it's the same note as A sharp. Are you with me? Okay, now from A, what's the next note name going down? G. But in between, we can say A flat. Great. From G down to, next note name, F, and in between, G flat or F sharp. And then from F, remember we go right down to E. From E down to D, and in between we have E flat or D sharp. And then from D down to C, and in between we have D flat or C sharp. Now, whether you call it a sharp or a flat has to do with what key you're in. So how many of you have had an experience where maybe you're a singer and you're like, okay, well, the original key of the song is G, but that is way too high for me. I need to find a different key. So maybe I'm going to do it in E, or I'm going to do it in E flat if the original is G. This is all about the fact that those notes that we just talked about, the musical alphabet, are a system that if you choose certain ones and then you take those same relationships and translate that into another key, means starting on another note, it sounds the same, but it's a little higher or lower. So this is one of the reasons knowing theory is really, really helpful for us as worship leaders, that no matter what context we're in, we're ready to go. Like if I show up on Sunday and the person who was supposed to lead a song is sick, and she was a female leader, and now the male leader has to sing it, and I'm playing keys, and he can't sing it in G, he has to sing it in D, I'm able to play it in D, versus like, oh my gosh, I have to like relearn the song, and I can't do it, it's gonna be a train wreck, like I'm so nervous, right? And I'm sure we've all had situations like that, but again, this is equipping you so that you're ready to go no matter what. And I will also say this, there's no way I can teach you all about theory in 45 minutes, I'm not even gonna try, but if you take a lot of notes today, you should have enough that you can go home and then go back and study it, and then you can seek out some other resources. If you're interested in that, let me know and I can help you. But if you write all this down today, you're gonna like walk away with a good foundation. Okay, can I play the piano a little bit? Are you down for this? We like to listen to music, right? Okay, so I'm gonna play all those notes that we just did together. C, and would you say these with me? C, now I'm gonna go up a half step. C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C. Are you ready to come down? We'll go a little slower this time. C, B, now B flat, okay? A flat, G, G flat, F. Now remember, between F and E, it just goes straight down, F to E, and then E flat, and then D, and then D flat, and then C, okay? But how many of you know, most of the time we don't play all of these notes in one song? Those are 12 notes. In any given song, most of the time in a worship song, we're only playing 7 of those notes, and the chords that we play are constructed from 7 of those notes, okay? Is that all making sense so far? Okay, so when we choose 7 of those notes within this system of theory, that's called a key. So when I say, I'm gonna sing it in the key of C, that means I have 7 notes, but if you play it in the key of A flat, then you have a different 7 notes. But we always have one of every note name from the alphabet. Never 2 of them, only 1 of them. So let's look at what this is like in the key of C. So if I'm in the key of C, C is home. If you know solfeggio, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. C is do, okay? We're also gonna call C 1. So let's say this together, C 1. Good. And now what's the next note name? D, and that's 2. E is 3. All right, so that's do, re, mi, do, a deer, a female deer. You know that song? Okay, so these notes are not half steps away from each other. They are what's called whole steps away from each other. So a whole step is when you don't do that note that's in between. You just you skip over one and you go to the next one. So we're not gonna do C up to C sharp, we're gonna do C right up to D. And then from D, we're not gonna go to D sharp, we're gonna go right up to E. So we have C, D, E. So I want you to say this, C, D, E. Do that. C, D, E. Very good. Okay, and this is a whole step. And that's another whole step. Now, after E, that's a half step. We're going from E up to F. So we're creating a pattern here. Whole, whole, half. And did you hear how this one, you can hear the piano, right? Okay, can you hear how the half step is smaller It's called an interval. That's the distance between notes. The half step is a smaller interval than the whole step. Hear the difference between those two? So I want you to memorize this. Whole, whole, half. Okay, so say that. Whole, whole, half. Great, so in the C key, that takes us from C to D, from D to E, from D to F. Now we're gonna do another whole step. So raise your hand if you can tell me what's a whole step above F. G, very good. And then from G, let's have another whole step up to A, another whole step from A up to, and now we're gonna finish it off with a half step, which brings us back to C, very good. So here's the pattern that we just did. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Okay, now, listen to this. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Whole, whole, half, whole, whole. Do that with me. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. You'll never forget that, okay? Because if you put it in rhythm, then you'll never forget it. And I hope you wrote it down too. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. That is what's called the major scale formula. So a key signature is basically the same as a major scale. It's just telling us which 7 out of those 12 notes are being used in this song. Does that make sense? Okay, so in the key of C, what notes do we have? C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then C is technically the 8th note, but it's a repeat of the first C. So if we don't count that one, that's how you get those 7 notes, C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Are there any sharps or flats in that scale or that key? No. So C is kind of like the easy one because there are no sharps or flats. But sharps and flats aren't too hard either. Let's go to a key that has a sharp in it. So we're going to go to the key of G, and we're going to take that same formula, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, and we're just going to put it in the key of G. So let's start on G. What's a whole step above G? A. Good. Whole step above A. B. Now we just did whole, whole. What do we need next? Half. So what's a half step above B? C. Good. All right, so far we have G, A, B, C. What's the next whole step? Whole step above C. D. Good. Another whole step? E. Now another whole step. This one's a little tricky, okay? Yeah, the next one is F sharp, because if I go from E up to F, that's only a half step. So I need to make that an F sharp to get the whole step, and then again, we just finish with the G at the top. So that's G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. So in the key of G, we have 1 sharp, and what note is that? F sharp. In the key of C, how many sharps do we have? 0. Good. So those are the only keys that we're going to go through today, because I just want to give you a little nugget, okay, that you can run with, but you can absolutely run with this, because if you know the difference between a whole step and a half step, and if you know the formula, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, you can figure out any key, okay? So if somebody says, what notes are in the key of E? Then what you just have to do is you have to think, okay, what's a whole step above E, then a whole step above that note, okay? You just go through the formula and you can figure that out. Is that all clear? You feel like you could go home and do that with your notes written down? Not that you could do it perfectly in this moment, but that you could figure it out now that you know this? Okay, great, that's my goal. All right, so let's sing this together. Let's sing the G scale. If you're a singer, it's okay. I mean, if you're not a singer, it's okay, sing anyway. Here we go. We're gonna say numbers for each of these notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then at the top, it would be 8 or 1 again, doesn't really matter. Now let's do the same thing for the C scale. Now C is 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So notice how they sound the same, except that the C1 was higher, right? Did you hear that? What you're hearing is the relationships the fact that that pattern is the same in C as it is in G. And that's why we can transpose songs, meaning we can play songs in different keys, and they still sound the same. They're just higher or lower, and it's all because of those relationships, okay? So we are going to talk about the relationships as numbers, just like we did as we sang that scale. And this is where we get the number system. So can I quiz you a little bit on the number system? So C in the key of C is 1. What's D? 2. Okay, what's F? 4. Good. What's A? 6. And don't feel bad if you have to count on your fingers. If this is new to you, that's totally part of the process. I'll give you a little more time to answer, okay? Let's do this. When I ask you a question, I'm going to wait. Don't answer yet. I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, and then you answer, okay? In the key of C, what's 5? Okay, don't answer yet. In the key of C, what's 5? And I'll count. 1, 2, 3. G, excellent. Okay, in the key of C, what's 7? Don't answer yet. I'm not going to say if you were right or not. Okay, 1, 2, 3. B, very good. Okay, in the key of C, what is E? 1, 2, 3. Very good. All right, now let's switch it over to the key of G, okay? So we're going to find the same relationships, but the note names are going to be different because we're starting somewhere different. So in G, G is 1, right? What's A? 1, 2, 3, 2. Good. All right. How about in the key of G, what is D, okay? So you're going to tell me the number. Think about it first. Don't answer yet. In the key of G, what is D? 1, 2, 3. 5, very good. In the key of G, what is F sharp? 1, 2, 3, 7. Yeah, and a little trick that you can use to think of that is 7 is always one note below the do or the 1 because we only have 7 notes. So you get up to 7 and then you go back to 1 at the top. Okay, how about in the key of G, what is the 6? 1, 2, 3. E. Very good. Okay, so how many of you know how chords work? What does it mean to play a chord versus a scale? Somebody feel free to just speak out and answer that. What is a chord? 1, 3, and 5. Very good. And an even simpler way to describe that is a chord is multiple notes played at the same time, whereas a melody is notes played in succession. So if you're a singer and you're singing the melody, and somebody is singing harmony with you, and then somebody else is singing harmony on top of that, you are creating a chord. Or if you're a piano player and you have one note here, and one note here, that's a chord. If you're a guitar player, where your fingers are on the strings, that's dictating what chord you're playing. So a chord is just taking notes from that scale, like we just did, but instead of playing them in succession, we skip some of the notes and we play a bunch of them together. And it's usually 3 at a time, although it can be more than that. Usually in worship music, it's 3 at a time. So now let's go through some chords in the key of G, okay? So what we're going to do is, and if you're looking at this in your notebook, you could even draw, sometimes I like to draw lines to connect different notes. If you're looking at the scale, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, we're going to start on G, and we're going to skip A, and we're going to go to B, and then we're going to skip C, and we're going to go to D. So we get G, B, D. Can you sing that with me? G, B, D. And that's a G chord. And because we're in the key of G, this is also called the 1 chord. G, B, D. Sing that again. G, B, D. Okay, so that's called a G major chord. It's also called a G chord. It's also called a G triad. Those all mean the same thing. Now we're going to go to the 2. What's the 2 in the key of G? A. Good. So let's build a chord off of A within this key. So we're going to start with A, and then we're going to skip the next note in the scale, and we're going to go to C, and then we're going to skip the next note, and we're going to go to E. Very good. So now we have A, C, E. Would you sing that? A, C, E. Okay, now I want you to note that this is a minor chord, and we don't have time today to go into why that's minor, but that's okay. We can do that another time. But I want you to remember that the 1 chord is always major and the 2 chord is always minor. Okay, let's say that together. The 1 chord is always major, the 2 chord is always minor. So if you're playing a song in the key of G and there's a 2 chord, it's going to be A minor. It's most likely not going to be A major. There are exceptions to that, but usually it will be A minor, okay? So the 1 chord is what? G major. The 2 chord is A minor. What do you think will be the first note in the 3 chord? B, very good, because it's the 3rd note in the scale, okay? So let's build a chord off of B in the key of G. So B is the first note, and then we're gonna skip over the next note, and where are we gonna end up? D, and then we're gonna skip over the next note, and we're gonna end up on F sharp. Why does it have to be F sharp? Why can't I just play F? Right, because F sharp is in the key of G. If I play an F in the key of G, unless the composer specifically wanted it, I am wrong, okay? And again, it doesn't mean that you can't do it or you can't break the rules, but we're talking about the system. Miles Davis said you got to learn the rules and then you can break them. So today we're learning the rules. Okay, so B, D, F sharp, that's a B chord, and that is also a minor chord. So the 1 chord is major. What's the 2 chord? Minor. And what's the 3 chord? Minor. Good. And how about the 4 chord? What do you think the 4 chord is going to be in the key of G? It's called the root note, but the note that kind of starts off the chord. C, very good, because that's the 4. So we're going to start with C, we're going to skip over D, and we're going to get to E, and then we're going to skip over F sharp, and we're going to get to G. Good. And that's the 4 chord, and it's a C major. So we have G major, A minor, B minor, C major. This one, let's figure this out a little bit of a different way. I'm going to tell you what the chord is, and I want you to tell me what the notes are. The chord is D major, and that's the 5 chord. So think about this for a sec, okay, without saying anything, just to give everybody a little time to think. So the 5 chord is D major, and I want you to tell me in a minute what those 3 notes are. All right, so the first note is D, right? What's the next one? F sharp, good. And then the last one is A. Okay, so let's say this in sequence together from the 1 chord. That's G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, and we're going to do one more. We're going to skip over the 7 today, and we're just going to do 1 through 6. The 6 chord is E minor. So now again, you tell me what these notes are. In E minor, this is the 6 chord. E, good. What's next? G, and the last one is B. Excellent. Okay, so now let's say this sequence, but only using numbers, not using note names. 1 is major. 2 is minor. 3 is minor. 4 is major. 5 is major. 6 is minor. Good. The 7 is called diminished. It's very rare that you would see it in a worship song as part of the song. It's something that is often added to like give a little spice. That's like another level. We can again talk about that another time, but let's just focus on 1 through 6 right now. So the 1 is major, 2 is, 3 is, 4 is, 5 is, 6 is minor. Okay, so now that you know this, again, you can transfer this into any key. If you go to the key of F sharp, the 1 is F sharp, and that's going to be an F sharp major. The 2 is a G sharp, and that's going to be a G sharp minor. The 3 is A sharp, and that's going to be A sharp minor. It's the same exact formula. You understand that? Now, here's why this is really useful. Like I said, you can transpose songs to different keys if you know the chords like this. And you may be thinking, if you're one of the vocalists, you may be thinking, this is not relevant for me because I don't play keyboard or I don't play guitar, I don't play bass. Well, guess what? It is so relevant for you. There's so many things that you can gain and again, expand your capacity to do the best you can with what you have if you know these things. So I'll tell you an experience that I've had working with one of the singers on my team. She's a beautiful, beautiful voice, and she plays a little bit, but she's really more of a singer. And when she's singing, she's not thinking about chords so much. She's just thinking about the melody and about leading people in worship. Well, she decided to start really learning the number system so that she could lead better and communicate with the band better while on stage. So now whenever we have spontaneous moments in worship, let's say there's a song that's really on her heart that we didn't practice, she's like this to the band. 1, 2, 4. She's showing them what the chords of the song are because she has a song in her heart. Sometimes it's an original song, or sometimes it's a song that she knows but the rest of the band doesn't know yet, and she's able to actually teach it to them on the spot because she, as the leader, knows this language, and the band knows this language. And here's why numbers are really helpful. Numbers are universal, right? So with the number system, it doesn't matter what key you're in, it's always going to be the same, right? It would also be really hard to find a way, I don't know sign language, I guess you could do that, but it would be hard to be like, G, hey guys, next chord is E minor. It's really cool if you can just be like, hey, 5, 4, and they can just see you. Or if you have an MD on your team who's speaking into your ears, then they can say the numbers to you. And does that make sense? You with me? Okay, so I'm gonna give you a progression out of numbers in the key of G, okay? I'm gonna give you a chord progression out of numbers, and I want you to try to figure out what the chords are. And I'm gonna play it as we go. So the progression is 4, 1, 5, 6. 4, 1, 5, 6. And remember which numbers are always major and which numbers are always minor, okay? So 4, 1, 5, 6. I'll say that again. 4, 1, 5, 6. All right, think about that for a minute. Then I'm going to ask you what the chord names are. All right, who knows the first chord? C, good. Is it major or minor? Major, very good. What's the next chord? G, major or minor? Major, great. Next chord? D major, and then the last one is E minor, good. Who recognizes this song? The same God who never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now. Let's say the numbers. 4, 1, 5, 6. 4, 1, 5, 6. Okay, now great job, you guys. Let's say that we want to do Yes, I Will in a different key. So again, we're not going to go through all of that today, but you have the tools if you wrote all this down. What you could do is you could say, all right, I know that Yes, I Will is 4, 1, 5, 6. And I learned it in G, but I don't know, G's a little low for me. I think I want to try it in a different key. So all I have to know is the note names in the scale of another key, and then I can just do 4, 1, 5, 6, and that in that key. So I could make a chord chart, I could write it down, I could tell the band what chords I want to play, I could communicate that, and then most importantly, when you start to hear, I saw a lot of you smile when you heard that chord progression because you recognize it. You're like, oh, I know this song, right? How cool would it be if you could start to listen to music and be like, oh, I know that. That's just like Yes, I Will. That's 4, 1, 5, 6. That's the same chord progression. You're starting to recognize these things. So remember when I told you when you hear something and you're like, I want to do that, but I don't know what it is. Knowing the number system can really help you to be able to do that thing that you heard. And isn't that beautiful if we can learn from what we hear in the body of Christ? You hear a beautiful worship song and you're like, oh, I kind of like that. And by the way, chord progressions are not copyrightable. That's why we have so many songs that have the same chord progressions. Melody and lyrics are copyrightable, but chords are not. So you could have, the same, and there are plenty of songs that have the same exact chords, and it's totally cool. It's not stealing. It's not plagiarism. There's a finite number of chord progressions because there are only so many keys, right? So let's talk about another one. It's a song we did this morning. I'm not going to tell you which. Let's see if you can figure out which one it was. But this is a song that has a really common chord progression, okay? And I'll give you a hint. It's the bridge of the song, okay? And then I'll tell you two more songs that have the same chords. I'll do it again. See if any songs come to mind. This is the 4, the 5, the 6, and the 3. All right, who has some guesses of what song this might be? It's a lot of songs, so a lot of right answers. What do you think? Build My Life, absolutely. I will build my life. Sing it with me. Upon your love, it is a firm foundation. All right, here's another song that has the same chord progression. Death could not hold you. The veil tore before you. You silenced the boast of sin and grave. The heavens are roaring, the praise of your glory. For you are raised to life again. Such a pretty chord progression, isn't it? So how about you're in a worship set and you have a little time to stretch? Don't we love that when we have that? When we just have like an expansive time. Maybe it's a worship night, or maybe you have, like at my church, we have some time at the end of the service we call PS, post-service, where we just get to worship freely. Let's say we just played Build My Life, and we're like, I don't want to leave this moment. I want to sit here, but I also feel like the moment for Build My Life is kind of over. The band's still playing, 4, 5, 6, 3. I can just start singing, death could not hold you, and it flows so beautifully. And the only reason I would know to do that is because I know that little bit of, the number system, right? So you don't need to have a theory degree. You don't need to have gone to college for music to know all of this. Like, seriously, what I gave you today, I hope that you can take that chunk, digest it, share it, right? Maybe ask your leader, hey, is this something you're familiar with? If not, maybe we could study this together and bring this to the team. I started introducing this to my team about 1.5 years ago, and now we pretty much exclusively talk in numbers, which is really, really cool because it's so easy to transpose, and we do the same songs in different keys every week, depending on who's leading them. And it's just so easy for the band because once we've learned it in one key, we know it in every key because we've learned it by the numbers, which are the relationships, okay? So we have a couple minutes left. I would love to just take questions if you have any. Maybe questions about how this could be useful for you or how to go about implementing it or anything really. Yes? Yes, it is. Very good. Yep. So if the song is let's say the song is in A flat, and A flat's kind of a hard key to play in and to think about, you could play it in G and capo 1 because that's a half step up. Really good question. Anything else? All right. Well, I hope you guys feel good. Oh, there's another question. Yes. That's such a good question. Yeah, I think as a vocalist, it is really tempting to just pick the song that's best for my voice because I know that it's going to sound good and maybe it's going to be easy for me to sing. And you definitely don't want to pick a song that is going to strain your voice, But I do think it is really useful and important to consider the congregation. Even some of the songs, honestly, the songs that we listen to from our favorite worship bands that we all love, I can't imagine my congregation singing along to them in those keys. So we do them in different keys. And some songs that have the octave jump, where they start the verse down here, then by the second chorus, they're up here. that can be really, really hard for the average person to sing. And what we're doing is all about the average person being able to sing. So yes, that's such a good question. That really shows your heart for leading worship, for your congregation, and not just performing. So I love that question. And yes, I would say if you can't imagine most of your congregation being able to sing it, both men and women, I would try changing the key a little bit. And you can experiment. You can ask people too. Like sometimes I'll ask my friends who are not musicians, and my husband, he's a sound guy. He's an awesome sound guy, but he's not a singer. So I'll be like, hey, can you sing this? And if he can sing it, I'm like, okay, that's pretty good. If he's like, and then I'm like, all right, I maybe need to change this. So, yeah.
To follow up with that, then is there a range that is good for a congregation, like a typical key that will work more often than not?
Yeah, that's a good question too, but the answer is no, because every song lays in a different part of the key. So some songs could be in the key of C, but the note that's sung most is a G, whereas some songs are in the key of C, but the note that's sung most is a C, which is pretty far away from a G. So it really depends on the song. Yeah. But if you like look at the piano and you know where middle C is, and it's just kind of like the middle of the piano, that's usually a good range for people to sing in. Like 5 or 6 notes above C and 5 or 6 notes below C is a pretty good place to live in. So the key will change, but if you see where the notes in that song lay in that range, that's a good indication. Does that help? Okay. Yes.
Concerning harmonies, right?
Yeah.
So I can do harmonies high or whatever, but there are some that do harmonies that they want to go with me. How important is it to have like a 3-part, or if the person thinks they can sing harmony and they really can't? How do you,
Are you saying is it better to have the harmony even if it's wrong versus just have melody but everyone sings it correctly? Is that what you mean?
like, if there's 2 people that sing harmony, right?
Mm-hmm.
One might sing high, one might sing low, whatever, but the one person doesn't really have the ear for it, so they
Mm-hmm.
might go with what you're singing, or
Uh-huh.
sometimes they don't even sing the harmony, correctly. How do you deal with that because you don't
Yeah.
want that coming out wrong.
Exactly.
You don't want to hurt their feelings by saying, why don't you just sing,
Yeah, well, I mean, we could do a whole nother breakout on that. Like, how to, and that's a pastoring thing, really, like pastoring your team well. And even if you're not I don't mean that you have to be a pastor. I mean, like, if you're given stewardship over a group of people, even if it's only for one Sunday, like, you are pastoring them in effect. So obviously, you don't want them to do something that's going to sound bad, but then the way you communicate it is the most important thing. So not like, and not, I'm sure you wouldn't do this, but not like, hey, like, it's not really working out. That doesn't really sound good. But maybe you can find a long-term plan to help develop them, help them learn harmonies. But maybe that Sunday, it's like, hey, why don't you just sing melody with me? Because I actually think it's never a bad thing to have more melody, because that's what the congregation is going to sing. So especially if you're leading and you want to ad-lib, it's great to have someone with you who can sing melody, because then the congregation still has something modeling what they're supposed to do. So when in doubt, doubling melody, I would say, is definitely a win over having someone like unsure of the melodies and not feeling confident, and then it's not going to sound good. And then again, that's a distraction, a potential distraction to the congregation, right? If it sounds wonky. So yes, I'll take one more question, then we got to go. Yes. For sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, figuring that out ahead of time is really good. That our in the back there, that's Becky. She's our worship coordinator. She's an amazing worship leader. Has such a gorgeous voice. She actually goes onto Planning Center, where we have all of our songs, and she makes recordings for each harmony, so that when someone is scheduled to sing a certain harmony on a song, they have a recording and it's over the original track. So if you like play the track on your phone and then record on your computer or vice versa, you can actually sing along to it, and then everyone knows exactly what they're supposed to sing. So that really helps, because there's no guesswork on Sunday. So we have 10 minutes till the next breakout, so I'll let you go, but I wanted to let you know I have a free resource if anyone's interested. I have a card I can give you for a worship leader training program that goes into some of the stuff we talked about today, a lot of like heart stuff, spiritual stuff, some vocal stuff. So I'll be around if you want to hang and ask questions or if you want to grab a card. Thank you so much. This was so fun. Go study theory. Yay.